Here we go. Thank you. It took a while. Right, so you should have you can hear yet? What? Right, I'll go on here. Oh, you're turning off the, Alright, okay. Right, good evening. Good evening, Daniel Stewart. Good evening, Chris Nunn, Dave Oatey. Good evening, Wayne, Mr. Woodturner, and Mark, the gentleman Woodturner too. Nice to see you. Woodworm Paul, good evening to you. And good evening to Duncan, the Curly Turner. And that's about, Barry Fisher, good evening Barry, welcome. And Steve Ash, good evening. And Leroy, good evening, who's already retracted a message, I see, Leroy. One wonders, doesn't one? Let's have a look. Alan Russell, good evening to you, sir. Good evening, Paul Kavanagh, welcome. How are you? Some answers for my biggest problem, how to hide the credit card bill from the wife. Paul Kavanagh's asked if you miss it in chat. I really hope that that's me, has answers for the biggest problem, how to hide the credit card bill from my wife. There's an easy answer to that, get your own credit card. Steve Ash again, good evening. Alan Russell. As most of you are aware, it's a completely different format for me, something new. I'm joined, and I will say this officially when I start at 7:30, I'm joined by the one and only infamous Mark, the gentleman Woodturner, Mr. Mark Beckett, and I thank you very much for being my earworm. The reason that I'm doing that on this particular occasion, and hopefully on future occasions, is that it gives less chance of missing questions, especially on a session like this, where it's basically for the newer turner, the beginning turner. Although we have experienced turners on the chat answering questions, which is very kind of them, it annoys me a little bit that I miss things on the chat, so hopefully that will be addressed with this sort of a format. So once again, as I say, I've got Mark, the gentleman Woodturner, as my earworm. I also have a link to Mark's channel. He's got a YouTube channel, so go across and show him some love as well, and the link is will be in the description below when it's on YouTube. Good evening, Charlie. Kieran Smith, good evening to you. Don't think I've missed anybody. Sorry. Oh, you're right. This, as I say, ladies and gentlemen, is a new situation for me. So you're listening to me on the phone, are you, Mark? Right. That's why. Okay. No, I put it up because I got it wrong. I got it the other way round. I thought you were listening to me on the tube. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Is that better? That's okay. Okay. Good evening, Paul Hoyton. How are you? To demonstrate as new turner, I've learned so much from you all. That's good, Paul. That's excellent. Fred Taylor, good evening. Dave Nicol, good evening. Welcome. Just a Basic, good evening and welcome. Jennifer's Crafts, good evening. Mrs. Staunton, how are you? Good evening and welcome. And Peter the Park and Lawrence, good evening. John Middleburn, good evening to you. And as I always say, Steve Jeremiah, good evening, mate. If I say good evening to you twice, then I shan't say good evening to you next time. Good evening, Dave. Dave Clark, good evening to you. And welcome, of course. Clive Jeffrey, good evening and welcome. I don't expect to have as many people here this evening as normal, because two reasons. Number one, my good friend Pat Carroll is doing an IRD, and Pat is a really good turner, so if you get a chance, don't forget to go and watch him. And also, over in the UK anyway, I don't know if it's the 4th or the 5th series of Line of Duty starts at 9 o'clock. My video recorder, my DVD is recording that for sure. Good evening, Patrick Bowers, how are you? And welcome. Tony's Garage, good evening and welcome. Richard Phelan, good evening. Oh, nice, very nice, Kieran, very nice indeed. Good evening, Joseph. This is my old, and I mean old friend, as in age, Joseph King. Good evening, Joseph, how are you? Peter O'Donnell, good evening to you, sir. Well, thank you for giving me your time, Peter. I'm just going to pop on a break and have a quick vape, and I will keep an eye on the chat and welcome people as they arrive. Good evening, Mr. Pete, the Twisted Trees. Good morning. How are you? Hope you're well, mate. Thanks for coming. Steve Robbins, good evening. Welcome. And if I miss anything, the eagle eye of Mr. Mark will hopefully be in my left ear hole and my right ear hole, because I've got him in stereo, which is wonderful. I do. Every now and again, Wayne, yeah, maybe Wayne's in my right ear and I got Mark in my left ear, I don't know. But every now and again, Mark will say something just to make sure that I realise he's still here. Good evening, Blair, welcome. Andy, Llanelli, Shamai. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome. Andrew, Lord and Pearson, good evening to you and welcome. Good turn, Daily Blair. Good evening and welcome. I think you've had two, so I shall say hello to you next time. And Ronnie, good evening to you. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's fair enough. Mark is just explaining to me the rudimentaries, which I did forget actually, that there is between a 7 and 8-9 second delay with what Mark sees on the screen, and when he gets back to me in real time, if you like, over the messenger phone, but there will be a delay. Have a good premiere, Wayne. Take care, mate. Matthew Gallagher, good evening to you, and good evening and welcome. It's great to have you, Steve Nunn. Believe me. And there's no vodka in the Coke, in case anybody's asking. It's gin. Joseph King, quick question. Mike, are you showing how to turn a shamrock tonight? I'll tell you what I've got to say. No. My friend Joseph King has made a shamrock dish, obviously wood-based, an absolutely stunning piece. If you search Joseph on Facebook, you might find his Facebook page. Absolutely stunning. That's wonderful work. I mean, I don't like the bloke. I've met him in person. Can't stand him, but I'm in awe of his abilities and his skills, and I think that's why I don't like him very much. Good evening, Jeff Webb. How are you? Colin Izzard, good evening and welcome. Erwin Lampard, good evening and welcome. Steve Makel, welcome from Colorado. Well, this is Mike from Bedfordshire. Good evening to you and welcome. It's most probably sort of good afternoon to you, I should think. Have I missed any good evenings? May I ask, Mr. Earworm, have you noticed? I did say good evening to Lawrence, actually. You must have been sleeping. I'll say good evening to you again, Lawrence. Good evening, Chris. How are you? I hear in my ear that you bought his Mark's old lathe. Hope it's still turning. I'm sure it is. John Matthews, hoping you can talk about storing projects mid-turn. I just came down the next day to the shop and the piece I was working on was all split. Yeah, if Mark makes a note of that, I can go through that. I'm sure there are people on here like Pete and Wayne when he comes back from his premiere, and indeed Mark, who are au fait with solutions to that. I'll quickly add, I'm not going to actually cover that tonight, but I tend, if I've got a lever turning, if it's a wet turning, there are several methods. You can either do it as you would if you weren't turning it, i.e. put it in shavings in a bag overnight and seal it. I tend to use cling film, or saran wrap I think you call it in the US, and I find that works very well. If you're going to get back to it in a couple of days, it keeps whatever moisture is there in it, and it just releases it very slowly. And I found that works extremely well. Bobby Gannon, good evening. Kevin Newman, my old mate Kevin, how are you? Good evening and welcome. And I wasn't joking when I called you an old bugger, alright? It's his birthday not long ago. He's about 26, I think. He wishes. Sebastian, good evening, how are you? Paddy Behan, good evening and welcome. Robert Dolben, good evening. I think I said good evening to you. There's another one I'm not going to say it to tomorrow next time. Claire Rubin, good evening. No, you can't. I'll explain the situation when I sort of start at 7:30. You can't actually hear Mark. He is in my ear through these headphones. You're hearing me through my lapel mic, but Mark is there purely to prompt me and to guide me in the right direction if I miss things. But I say we're going to be working. I'm hoping that in the future Mark will be more visible and audible to you, but it's something I've got to work out. It's a completely new situation, this, because I've only ever done it on my own. Oh, poor old fella, done it on his own. Good evening, Stuart. How are you? Welcome. Nigel Oram, good evening. Any thoughts on the new Sorby hollowing rest? I've looked at it. It looks capable, yes. Let's put it that way. It looks capable, but I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at it. I'm sure it'll work. Good evening, Graham. Cunning Stunts is my old friend Graham Light, and I shall be mentioning him at 7:30 when I start proper. Well, I'm really humbled. Oliver's, oh God, I was going to say I'm humbled. Now the evening's gone down the pan. Oliver's wood turning. Mr. Ed Oliver's turned up. Ed Oliver's in the house. Yeah, Ed Oliver's in the building. Good evening, Ed. How are you, mate? DJ Brinkley, good evening to you and welcome. Lawrence Pagasia, I did say good evening to you, didn't I? Although Mark told me I didn't, he was fibbing. Thank you. Nick Castle, good evening to you, Nick. Metals, good evening and welcome. Right, quick break so I can have an unofficial vape. I'm not actually vaping, you know, I'm just breathing heavy. Terry Bartlett, good evening to you, sir. Jacques Gimeno, good evening, how are you? And welcome. TFT Turning, and who did I miss, Mark? Gav today, good evening to you, and welcome. Dave Rothwell, my old friend Dave, good evening, and don't forget to give my love to Fee. And I think that just about that covers it, I think, on the, and it's 1 minute to 7:30. Good evening, Frederick Day, good evening. BB Turning, just good evening, Shay, how are you? I think I said hello to Paul Dowling. Vincent Charlton, good evening to you, sir. Ryan Brian Hoyt, good evening, how are you? From Minnesota, I'm honoured. I've said it 3 times, Lawrence, have I? Right, well that's you for the next 2 lives, and I'm going to ignore you totally now. It actually admits he's not quick enough to type all the names. You can't type it. Sorry? Oh, Brian, yeah, missed you. And Alison Oram. Good evening, Alison. Good evening, Brian. How are you? And Rob CP. Good evening to you, sir. Welcome. Okay. Woodworm Paul, good evening to you. We're going to start officially now, I think. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's a real pleasure, as usual, to see you all here. And I have a different format, that's why I'm wearing the headgear. I have my good friend Mark the Gentleman Woodturner in both ears. He is being my earworm. We talked about this. I mean, Mark earworms for many people, and he's very accomplished at it, as well as being an accomplished turner too. And the reason I got together with Mark is that I think that when I do this sort of a video, I don't want to miss any questions. So as I've said before, a lot of turners will answer, more experienced turners will answer questions in the chat, which is what it's all about. It's sort of a sub-community, if you like. But there are questions directed at me specifically that I might miss on the chat, and I scroll back and I still might miss them when I'm answering what I have caught up with. So the idea of Mark being here, he will keep an eye on the chat. And if I miss something, or if somebody has a question that I can answer while I'm doing something, I can do it sort of as I'm going along. So hopefully all your questions will be answered this evening. And I'm hoping, good evening James Cassidy, I just noticed you arrived. Good evening, Sam, welcome. I'm hoping that Mark and I can work together in future demos when I'm actually doing turning, if you can call it that. When I got a bit of wood on the lathe, let's put it that way. Okay, so I've done something similar to this a few months ago, but I was asked again if it was possible to do something on this line. And so what I've done, I've sort of sat down and I've thought about all the common questions that I get asked on a very regular basis. And this, I hasten to add, this again is really directed at the beginning turner and the newer turner. And that is what tonight is about. So any questions, fire them when wherever I am. Mark will be keeping an eye on it. Before we get started, I've introduced Mark. I will put a link to Mark's channel as well in the description below. I'd like to make a mention, which I don't normally do on demos, on live demos or live sessions. A very good friend of mine, Graham Light, is involved with a woodturning club called the Lincolnshire Woodturners Association. And the reason I'm giving him a shout out is that I think it's their 40th anniversary, but they have 60 full-time members. Their oldest member, I believe, from memory is around 80-ish, and they have young members as well, new members coming along, but obviously with COVID they haven't actually been able to meet. And it is, I don't know what the radius is, but it is the one and only woodturning club in the Lincolnshire area for a long, for a big radius. So I'll put the information in the description below, the website, and indeed an email if you have any questions or you'd like some information, because if you're in that area, that catchment area, Graham's a great guy and he keeps on telling me all the other people are good as well, so I'm sure they are. So it's something to think about if you're in the Lincolnshire area. That's the Lincolnshire Woodturners Association. Okay, yes. Yes. And good evening to Mark Saunders. Oh, Falco's, good evening and welcome. Cornish Maid, good evening. Circular Wood by Keith. Good evening, Keith. Welcome to you. Oh, Mike. How are you, Mike? Ilminster Mike. Good evening. Rubberdubs. Good evening, Rubberdub. How are you? I've said hello to Rob CP, Mark. I'm sacking the earworm. Sacking him. Good evening, Martin. Gentle Turn, how are you? Welcome. And Robert Dolman, I think I said hello to Robert as well, but nevertheless I'll say good evening to you again. Please make a note, Mark, all the people I say hello to more than once, make a note, because I should totally ignore them on their next visit. Right, so these, what I'm going to go through is no particular order. Any questions that are thrown up that I miss, as I say, what I intend to do is do one section, and then we'll have a bit of a question and answer situation, and then I'll go on to the next session. But as I say, they're not in any particular order of preference. One of the main questions I get asked, and I'm sure a lot of other turners do as well, are, number one, what lathe should I get? Number two, what tools do I need? That's really asking, what provisions do I need if I'm going to spend 2 years in the desert and I've never done it before? You don't know. And all I can say on the lathe front, is whatever your budget can stretch to, invest in it. The size of lathe depends again on budget and indeed available space in the area within which you're going to work. And I know this is common knowledge to a lot of people possibly, but I think it's important. Don't underestimate your aspirations as you get more experienced in the craft. If I had a penny for everybody that said I wish I got a bigger lathe when I started, I wouldn't have to do work. I could spend all my time boring you lot on YouTube. You can always turn a small piece on a large lathe, but you cannot turn a large piece on a small lathe. You might start off pen turning, you might start off doing little lidded boxes and what have you, because you have to with regards to space. But if that is not the issue, get the biggest lathe that your budget will go for, because you will use it, believe you me, you will use it. One thing I think is my opinion again, if you have a budget and you can get a brand new lathe which is sort of in that category, but you can get a second-hand lathe which is a better lathe, if you like, seriously consider it, because lathes are really good workhorses. If it's a good make, do your research and get as much information as you can. Join a club if you can after this COVID thing finishes. Go onto websites and get as much information as you can to help you make that decision. And the same thing works with tools. My advice always is look at the basic box sets that the major players offer, people like Sorby, Record Power, to name just two. Every company virtually does a starter set. No disrespect to Harbour Freight, but I don't know what we have in comparison over here. Don't get a cheap set of tools to begin with, a very cheap set. It's not worth it, because you will regret it, believe you me. So again, what you can afford, don't go for the top, but get a good set which will do you proud. Lathe height is something that I'm asked. I know this is chopping and changing a bit. We're going from what lathe, what tools to lathe height. I'm going in order of sort of preference of people asking me, what lathe height should I have? It's a bit difficult to show you up close, if you like, but the rule of thumb for lathe height is that when you stand next to your spindle and you bend your arm sort of 90 degrees, approximately, I mean it's not an exacting science, your elbow should be approximately around spindle height. Now this is very relevant because I took a class last week and the young lady that I was teaching was under 5 foot and she was a good 6 inches below here. But again, I hasten to add, there's a wonderful turner called Emma the Tiny Turner, and she is a tiny girl, but by God, she's a big turner. She's a wonderful turner. And she really breaks all the rules in the book, because she does turn like this, sort of with the spindle much higher than her. But on a normal situation, the reason that is a sort of a rule of thumb, you're relaxed, your shoulders aren't hunched, and you're not on tippy toe, you're not stretching up, you're not putting pressure on your shoulders and your back. It's the most relaxed position, and then when you're turning, everything is sort of just nice and loose. So that is the the rule of thumb, if you like, for the height of a lathe. You can put a platform behind for turning. I personally am not happy with that, because you have to sort of climb, if you like, maybe only 3 or 4 inches, but you have a trip hazard to get to the lathe. And when you get off that trip hazard to go and sharpen your tools or take a comfort break or whatever, you could trip. So far better raise the lathe itself and you keep your feet firmly at ground level. That's my advice, my opinion. Yeah, well, apparently Ed Oliver has said in the chat, get a pallet. Well, that's a great idea, I agree with you, but on my personal opinion, of course, on a regular basis, to actually climb onto the platform to do your turning, I think is a bit of a trip hazard, but that's just me. Who am I to argue with a professional turner? Is Ed? Yes, Ed is, isn't he? That's right. Okay. The other thing as well is, what do I need to do to keep my lathe working? Basically, like I do, take it to bed with you every night. No, what you need to do, the basic maintenance, is just keep your bedways clean, and that's a very easy job. You can use PTFE spray, you can use machine wax, which is what I do. If you're turning wet wood, make sure that you give it a good dose of whatever you do to protect it, and then make sure you clean it afterwards. And apart from that, and keeping your chuck, keeping debris and so on out of your chuck, never taken a chuck, well, I have taken a chuck apart, but not for maintenance. But there's basic, just keep things clean. And if you look after your machinery will look after you. I know it's an old saying, but that is true. But there's very little things that need to be done. And if you should mark your bedways, it's very easy to get the scratches out with some 0000 wire wool and a bit of elbow grease. Yes, Graham Lloyd's got a question. Yes, Graham. Yeah, right. Yeah, Graham, throw it away and get another bit. No, to be honest with you, Graham, side grain tear out on a bowl is, and I know, because I know you, I know it's not a case of not sharp tools. I know it's not a case of tool presentation, but I think possibly I've turned some very punky wood and I get tear out. There are several methods, obviously, of reducing tear out, but I just think if you've got something like that and you can't get rid of the tear out, there are two options. You've either got to go down the wood hardener route or the really soaking in sanding sealer route. And apart from that, I honestly have no answer. That's what I do. Sometimes it's just can't get rid of it. If you can do a shear cut, you can do negative rake scraping, you can do what you like. Your tool presentation can be perfect. Some woods will tear because they're punky. If it's not punky, I would normally say it's down to tool sharpness and your turning style. But I'm sure the years you've been turning, that's not the case. So that hasn't really answered your question, but Yeah, Edward Watling. Edward Watling has asked me what the safest wood for a new turner is and a good place to get blanks. Many Oliver's wood turning, not say because Ed's on tonight. Oliver's wood turning, he handles there. You can get it on eBay. My best way, how can I say, apart from exotics, the best wood is free wood. Get to know an arborist, get to know a tree fella. Keep an ear out for chainsaws going. That is a very good source. As far as wood is concerned, any wood is okay to turn. even pine, and I get shot for saying that, because if you work on pine, you get a good finish on pine, you're getting good tool control. You don't want to spend loads of money when you're starting, because a lot of it's going to be turned down to a matchstick. Well, it should be, because that's your training, that's your teaching. So don't get too hung up on the types of wood. Sycamore is a nice wood to turn. Yew is a lovely wood to turn, but you have to have proper PPE, which is what I'm going to go on to next. Personal protection, because yew dust can be toxic. Well, it is toxic, and it can actually cause respiratory problems, and it will obviously affect one person more than another, but it is still, you have to be aware of these things. So I hope I've answered your question. Have I missed any others? All right. Sorry, can you say that again, Mark? He turned... Yeah. Right, yes. Yeah. Lovely. Yes, I have. Yes. And I've actually... Good evening, Philip Greenwood. I've actually got a couple of videos up on YouTube of turning fruit, and I've turned quite a few bowls as well. But yeah, it's great. Spalted beech is lovely to turn, and I tend to put real fruit in it, but there you go. But well done, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, malts. If you ask 10 wood turners a question, you're going to get 12 different answers. My answer would be to take a roughing gouge and a spindle gouge. If you can get a lesson, get a lesson. Obviously with COVID that is difficult now. Look at YouTube videos on the basics of using a spindle roughing gouge. Get your stuff to round, practice that, and then take a 3/8 spindle gouge, in my opinion, and just start to turn curves and shapes and just get au fait with the tool itself. That's my opinion. Don't expect too much, just play and see what you can do. Keep the revs down low, practice a nice smooth cut, and then when you get more confident, start to turn things up. And again, I'm not vying for business, because if somebody wants to get in touch with me on Messenger, you're more than welcome to. And while I'm on furlough, if you contact me on Messenger and tell me when you're free, I'll give you a video call and we can have a quick chat face to face, if that's any help to you. Is that about it on those? I beg your pardon, correct? Indeed. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I will do from now on. The last question was, what wood, as I haven't turned before, what wood should I use and what tool should I use? Sorry, it's my mistake. It's a new experience, this, for me. Oh, good evening. Well, that's it. Wayne the Woodturner and Ed Oliver. That's it. Finished. That's the end of life as we know it. Good evening, Martin. Yeah. Peter O'Donnell has asked me whether the Sorby Pro Edge is worth the investment. Unequivocally, yes. I spent an undisclosed amount on my sharpening systems up until I got the Sorby. I spent a fortune on CBN wheels and a slow speed grinder, because when I got into CBN they were expensive in the UK, very expensive. And I went for the Pro Edge. I'd seen it and used it a couple of times at shows, took the plunge. Within a day I had sold my CBN setup, which paid for the Pro Edge and some. It is a wonderful system, in my opinion. It's repeatable, it's simple, gives an excellent edge, and it's quick. What more can you ask for? So the short answer is yes, it is worth every penny. DJ Brinkley, I'm not turning tonight. This is a questions and answers. I will be doing a couple of, how can I put it, show and tells, how to overcome the problems, things like tear out, and what somebody asked me what's the difference between a pull cut and a push cut, and a shear scrape and a shear cut, and those are 4 cuts I will show you as well. Bearing in mind this is for beginners and for the newer turner. One thing, I'm going to break for a second. In my last live, the last 2 lives, I was doing a hollow form, and I just said I would show it to you. I haven't finished it yet because I haven't been able to get to it, but that is as it looks at the moment. I've done the hollowing. I managed to get a nice void here without it collapsing, but I did have a problem here that completely degraded all the cracks there, and I've managed to stick it back together again. So yeah, it will be finished. Whether I'll be happy enough to sell it to the guy that wants it, I'm not sure yet, but it needs a bit more TLC. But I did say I would show it to you, so it's still alive, let's put it that way. Okay, if everybody's happy for me to go on to the next segment, and then we can obviously ask more questions later on this segment and the next one. One of the most important factors, if you like, is PPE, personal protection equipment, and a lot of people groan about that. Oh God, you know, I've got to spend money on this. But well, your health is your health, and it is your responsibility, and it is your decision what you do and what you don't do. My 2 basic things that I think you cannot mess around with is, number 1, your eyes, and indeed your head, and number 2 is your lungs. So you don't have to be a Mississippi lawyer to realise that you need to protect those when you're on the lathe. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on day one, but what I am saying is the very least you need is a set of these safety glasses. I wear glasses, and when I'm demoing I will wear safety glasses, but not with all pieces, because if it's a big piece, an out of round piece, like for example the crotch I've done the last couple of weeks, I wore a full face shield. But let's just go on this. The bare minimum: a set of safety glasses and a dust mask, not the what I call a painter and decorator dust mask that you put on and throw away. They're next to useless. At least a valved dust mask, and if possible something like this, which has filters in it, which is again a respirator. People like me with beards, not much good, because they rely on a really good seal. However, the very bare minimum: face protection, as I say, goggles. I might get shot down in flames for saying this. I personally think you should wear a face shield all the time at the lathe, unless you're demonstrating. That is an exception. These, which are the basic face shields, are, in my opinion, next to useless. Why? Mark's going to go west for a minute. You put these on, okay, and you get smacked in the face with something, it's going to hit you straight on the nose, because there is nothing for it to register against, so it's just flopping. It's got to save your eyes to a certain extent, but they really, in my opinion, I use that when I'm strimming, like a big pair of goggles, that's all. Bare minimum, something like this Uvex, which when you put that on, this part here comes up against your chest. If you get hit, it's to the British standards, necessary for impact. You've got more chance of not breaking your nose and getting away without any injury, any substantial injury. And I do wear that quite a bit. As you can see, that's why I hang it up so high. If you can go that extra mile, sort of an all-in-one, something like this, which is what they call a powered respirator. Excuse me, I'm just going to put my earlugs back on so that I can hear Mark and he can hear me. Okay, can you hear me, Mark? Yeah. That's good. A powered respirator. There are a couple of major players on the market. This one's a GSP, actually an Evolution by Axminster, which is the same piece of kit, or the Trend AirShield Pro. Now what these do is that they, number one, they protect you. They've got a full face shield. In addition, you've got a bump cap, which keeps your bonds happy as well, and the air is filtered through these filters and passes over your face and out through those holes there. Now these are ideal for people like me that have got beards, because they rely on positive pressure. They don't rely on a perfect seal around the face. For that you have to have a clean shaven face, otherwise they are not as effective as they should be. But these alleviate that necessity, because they rely on positive pressure. There's a battery pack at the back which lasts up to 8 hours on this one, and a little motor in here, and that drags the air through and out, and that's that. Now I'll be honest with you, there's this and the Trend AirShield Pro. They're about the same price. The level of filtration on the JSP is less than that on the AirShield Pro. PP2, PP3 on the AirShield Pro. But it is the most uncomfortable thing you'll ever wish to see, in my opinion. I've been using this for 7 years now. I always think that any type of dust protection must go hand in hand with good dust extraction at the lathe, at the point of generating your dust when you're sanding. That's my personal opinion. Yes? Yeah. Yes. Right. That's a very good point. Somebody's made the point that the Evolution has a British Standard impact protection certificate for the screen. They do one of these with a screen with much less impact protection, so make sure it's the correct one. If you get the Evolution from Axminster, it is the correct one. But a very valid point. I was told years ago when I bought this, it was very popular with pigeon fanciers, because when they go in to clean all the poop out of the pigeon thing, they use that. Well, of course they didn't need the impact resistant shield, so it was a little bit cheaper than buying one like this with full impact protection on the visor. Good point, and thank you who brought that up, and thanks for reminding me, Mark. I appreciate it. Where am I going? Yes, so the dust extraction at the lathe is important as well when you're sanding, and if possible an air filtration system as well, which takes care of 99% of your airborne particles, and the airborne particles are the minute ones, and they're the ones that get down inside you. So there's those things to consider. But it is a fool, in my opinion, that disregards the necessity to protect yourself when you're working at the lathe or in this type of environment. And the final thing, which has escaped my notice, ear protection. I never wear ear defenders when I'm turning, because I like to hear the wood. Not that it sings to me, but it tells me if it's got a crack, if it's got a fault, if there's a bit of metal in it or something. So I feel happier being able to hear the wood going. But it must be said that consistent noise can affect your hearing, so again the choice is yours. So that covers my questions, if you like, that I get asked on a regular basis regarding what do I need to protect myself, and I think I've covered everything that I wanted to on that score. Oh, one other thing, I wear rings normally and a watch. Personally, when I'm at the lathe, rings come off, no watch, no bracelets, no sleeves. If you have got sleeves, make sure they're Velcro tight there, because believe you me, you've only got to search on YouTube, bigger lathes, I admit, industrial lathes, and see what a lathe can do to you if you get caught in the chuck. It's not pleasant. It is not pleasant. Okay, I think that covers that section. And the next section is going to be work holding, various methods of work holding, and take any questions on what we've gone up to now, if there are any. Yep. Erwin has asked me if I have any preferences on a negative rake scraper. I have a couple, or several in fact, of Simon Hope's negative rake scrapers which I get on really well with. However, I would always suggest you experiment first with how you get on with them. Now there's a very easy way of doing it, and this is what I did to begin with. Forget the angles I've got, because I've got this at 35 degrees, 35 degrees. That's a bad example actually. There we go. My little 1 inch, or ½ inch is it? Yeah, my little ½ inch scraper. Okay, that there has an angle of 60 degrees on the main bevel and a relief angle of, I think it's 25 degrees. To see if you get on with a negative rake scraper, take one of your scrapers, take a scraper and just put a relief cut on the top and see how you get on with it. I mean, I think they're brilliant. I think they're safer, in my opinion, especially for a newer turner, because you can actually you can scrape like that on centre like that. You don't have to lift the handle to save your catching, etc. They are very, very user friendly and they're very effective. The only thing with them is that obviously, being they have a more acute angle, the edge doesn't last as long as a traditional scraper. But that, you know, there's always a bit of a caveat. But I love them, I really do. Yep, another question. Yep. I'm sorry? Yeah. Right. Right. Pat and Ray, did you say? Ray Murphy? Yeah. Pat and Ray have asked, number one, about footwear and also about using gloves. Personally, dead against using gloves because I think they're dangerous. The only thing I will do, if I'm turning something which is chucking off bark, etc., etc., I'll wear fingerless gloves like this. Okay. And only on the one hand, because that's the hand that's getting smacked with the bits falling off, but as soon as I can, that comes off. That's my own personal opinion. However, fingerless gloves, if they haven't got loose bits on them, I suppose are fairly safe, okay? But ordinary gloves, definitely not, in my opinion. And footwear, again, I don't actually wear steel toe caps, but I do wear full boots, always, never open toe, and sandals, and I'll get slated from people who do. It is your foot, it's up to you. I dropped something a couple of months ago, I can't remember what it was, but it hurt. And I wish I'd had my steel toe caps on, but I didn't. And I very rarely wear them in the workshop, but I do wear what I would call substantial boots. So that's my opinion on that. Oh yeah, Falcoast has a question. Yeah. Right, I actually should have said this about chip extraction. I use dust extraction, okay, and I use pneumatic, purely because that suits me and I've had them for years. Well, the second one I haven't, but I've used that brand and they're extremely good. Whether you use a chip extractor in conjunction with extraction, it depends on your layout, it depends what you're looking at. I don't catch chips, I clear them up. What I'm concerned about is catching the dust. Quite often, if I've got a dusty bit of old spalted wood, but I'm not on camera, I will have my dust extraction right next to it, because a lot of dust comes off when you're turning, even on a very dry, punky bit of wood. But I don't bother with chips. Chips just go on the floor and I clean them up. and I don't have a problem with that. But bearing in mind, I don't turn the hours that a lot of people do, so a chip extractor might be the way to go. But I personally think as long as you've got good dust extraction, and air filtration if possible, and good PPE around your face, that's what you need, personally. We're up to date, that's good. Okay, the next thing is work holding. I do get a lot of questions about this, as I'm sure a lot of the other more experienced turners do as well. When you buy a lathe, you normally get one of these, which is a faceplate. Okay. Now a faceplate is, as the name suggests, it's for faceplate work, and you literally screw your blank to the piece. Now faceplates come in, that's a 6-inch, there's a 4-inch, a 3-inch. You can see there's rust on them. I very rarely use them. Having said that, the Axminster, and I'm not promoting Axminster, it just so happens I started off with Axminster chucks when I started turning in 2011, and the chucks I've got now take some of the jaws that I bought then. Now Axminster do a faceplate, what they call a faceplate ring, and we'll just go to the cam now. Now this is a faceplate ring, and what you do is literally screw, I've only put 2 screws in just for demonstration purposes, you screw that to your blank, and this is just a small blank because it's easier for me to hold. Now what happens there is that you don't screw this directly to your spindle like you would with a regular, you just put it on the C jaws, the dovetail jaws, and there's your faceplate. You turn the outside of your bowl, you've still got your chuck on, you put your mortise or your tenon on here, you take it out, unscrew the ring and reverse it, put it on your chuck, job done. The other method, apart from faceplates and faceplate rings, is a worm screw. Now a worm screw is, as the name suggests, in the centre of here on the other side is a screw, thread, large screw. Now a lot of systems you put that in the centre of your jaws, clamp your jaws down on it, do your turning, and the same idea as this, but what Axminster do, this has the screw on the back of this plate. I've actually put a spacer here because I didn't want the full length of the screw into the blank. And then similarly, except instead of expansion mode as it was for the faceplate ring, it is you shut the jaws, close the jaws, and there you go. So you turn again to the back of your bowl, and then all you have to do is to take the worm screw out. You will obviously keep it in your chuck and turn it off, and then you've got your hole there, but you've made your tenon or your mortise on the back, and away you go. So those are the basic methods of work holding. Then the next thing, obviously, from going up from there, is a chuck. Now this is something which is very near to my heart, because I get asked a lot of questions. What am I doing wrong? I put a tenon on my piece and I put it in the chuck, and I'm turning away and it flew out of the chuck. The tenon didn't break, it flew out of the chuck. Right. Did you get a catch? Well, it wasn't really a catch, it was just a little bit, and it went flying. Okay. And then you see, this hasn't happened lately, but then you see the tenon that they've done. Tenons and mortises for chucks are size critical. Every manufacturer will have an optimal size for your mortise or your recess or your tenon, or some people call it a spigot. And I've got a little demo here to show you how much different it is if you get it wrong. So we'll go to the chuck again now. Okay, this again, I'm not I'm not promoting specifically these chucks, but it just happens to be an Axminster chuck because that's what I use and have done, as I say, since I started turning. Now these are the very popular sea jaws. They are dovetail jaws on the outside for expansion mode into a recess or a mortise, but the inside of the jaw is not dovetailed, which is quite rare because a lot of manufacturers, quite rightly, you know, they have a dovetail on the outside and on the inside. And I was actually turning for a few months and I was merrily putting a dovetail and I realised there is no dovetail. They have a straight aspect to them, and I hope this camera can pick that up. Let's get there. Okay. I don't know if it's going to focus well enough. You can see there that the dovetail is on the outside, and on the inside it is straight, and it has a lip on the end, at the end of the jaw, and that grips down on the tenon. And as I say, it has dovetails for the mortise. Now these jaws for a tenon, there are different measurements for the mortise, but for a tenon it's 56 mil. Okay, so this is, and believe it or not, I've seen it, this is a tenon of 72 mil. Okay, now you can see there's a massive gap here, all right, and you're only going to get contact on 8 points, 2 points on each jaw. Now, sad as I am, I spent some time making the marks, so you can see the black marks there, and that is point of contact when I really clamp down on it. So there's 8 points of contact, so all that wood there is not being, there's no contact with the jaws, so obviously that's very bad, obviously. Now conversely, this is a 49 millimeter tenon, so bear it in mind and remember that the correct size of tenon is 46 mil, it's 56 mil, sorry. So when this goes in and I clamp down on it, see how small that's getting? Smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and oh, there we are, we've got it. They're virtually touching. Okay, now the converse happens there is, what happens there, you only get 4 points of contact because you're only getting contact with that part of each jaw. And again, I've been very sad and I've marked on there, and those 4 marks represent the holding surface of that setup. Okay, here this is a, no, that's not the one, that's not the one, this is the one. This one is the correct size tenon of 56 mil. You can see the gaps you've got here, approximately 6 mil, because jaws are cut from one piece of steel, and they will form a perfect circle when in the right size, and the right size for the perfect circle is 56 mil, and you also get perfect contact. Now those black lines represent the whole of the jaw in contact with your tenon. It's very important that this part of the tenon doesn't touch the back of the jaws, obviously. You want a nice square shoulder so that the front of the jaws sit nice and snugly to there. Now you'll notice on these that there is a gap, well it's not a gap, but well it is a gap, between that part and the shoulder of the blank, and that is for the lip on the front of the jaws. So I always, when I use these jaws, I always make a little valley there, and that means that that lip fits snugly in there and I get complete. If I don't do that, on softwood it's okay, because you can clamp down on it and it will, it will bite into the wood and you'll get that full contact. This is oak, and it's laminated oak actually, so I always would cut that groove to accept the lip, because that way it goes in, it gets hold of it, and you get the full contact of your jaws. The other thing, yeah, okay, there's a question. I'm sorry? Paul Morris, yeah. Right, I use a, oh right, sorry, Paul is asking, is there a way of centering, excuse me, I've just got a message come up on my OBS, so I get rid of that. Okay, is there a way of centering your faceplate? The answer is yes, there is. And can I find it? Yes, I can. What I did, this is a 6-inch faceplate, obviously. What I did was turn out of a bit of oak. I did this years ago. Just this, if you can see. Now that slots down in there, and as you can see, underneath it just pokes out. So you found the centre of your blank with whatever method you want to use, whether you use one of those perspex with all the rings on it, or whether you use some form of a caliper. You've got what you want as the centre of your blank, and then you have an indent. You make an indent with a bradawl or whatever, and then this little chappy will sit in that little indent. So when it's in here, you've got your faceplate centered, and that's what I use for it. So yes, there is a but you have to turn it. Well, it's not difficult. We're turners. So yeah, there is that method of centering it, and I use the same thing because I'm going to go on to glue blocks very quickly. For my glue blocks, I've just got to center this surface will go on to the back of the blank. So there's glue on here. I've found the centre of the blank, and I've just got a hole in here, and this goes through, centres it up as I want it. So there are ways of doing it. Yes. Any other questions, Mark? Well, hello? No? Oh, it's okay. Wake up, Mark. Mark has fallen asleep. Wake up. Hello? No, I'm only kidding. Ladies and gentlemen, he is here. Okay, thanks for those questions. I'll just go back, if I may, to the chuck. So we've covered the two smaller tenon, the two bigger tenon, and we've seen what the correct tenon will do. Well, apart from the dimension or diameter of the tenon, another important factor is the size or the depth of the tenon. Every manufacturer's jaws will have different measurements, different depths, etc., and indeed different diameters for their sets of jaws. But it is as dangerous, in my opinion, if you have a long tenon. You can see what's happening here. We can't get the front of the jaws up against the shoulder. So what you're doing, you're pinching down. I've now got it closed, okay? And if I go to the overhead, you will hopefully be able to see there's a gap between the front of the jaw and the back of the piece. So you haven't got that proper purchase. You'll get away with it with a little blank like this, but if you're putting that onto a bowl or to a heavy piece, it's gonna fly. It's gonna fly, take it from me. And then you've got the other extreme. On this side is a perfect tenon. Okay, sorry, you're on the overhead still. Mark, you've reneged on your duty. You've reneged on your duties. I mean, Mark is being paid a phenomenal sum to make sure that I have the right camera. But anyway, okay. You can see it's very fortunate, ladies and gentlemen. You can't hear what he's telling me here because he's been very rude. Right, this tenon is the correct diameter. Okay, it's 56 mil. But look at it, and I've seen this done honestly. Now, it'll fit in there. It'll give you really good contact on the jaws. But I'll tell you what, that's not going to, again, for a small piece like this, you most probably get away with it. I mean, I admit I've done it myself, but if you've got anything substantial, you want to make sure that there's a very slight gap when you've done your perfect tenon 56, that this here, when you put it into the jaws, hopefully I don't know if you're able to see this, there's a very, very small gap between this part, the back of the it does help if you want to put something into the jaws to open them. Okay, there's a very, very slight gap between the base of the tenon on the piece to the back of the jaws. That means it's tight up against, and that is very important. And the final method, well, I'm sure there are many more methods, I know, but the final method, and I haven't actually got an example because it's literally watching paint dry, is a glue block. Now, a glue block can take any shape. I mean, I like to have cross grain. This one I've actually epoxied a nut in, and I've gone to town on it. But you can actually just make a tenon, and it can fit into your jaws, and you literally glue your piece to the front of the glue block. I use, again, I'm not being sponsored by Bosch, I wish I was. I've had this gun, it's the Bosch PKP 18E. I've had this gun for 8 years, and I really want to get another one because it's looking pretty sad, but it's still working. It uses the 9mm glue sticks. There are a couple of caveats with using hot glue. Number one, the glue gun has got to be able to get those 9mm hot sticks almost like water. You've got to heat them, you've got to get it to the right heat, as hot as you can get it. The wood has got to be dry, both on the glue block and indeed on the piece you're going to glue to it. And 9 times out of 10, if I'm using a glue block, it's going to be end grain. So it's cross grain to end grain. The other thing you can do as well is to heat the wood slightly, which allows the glue to penetrate into the grain. I personally have never done that, but it does make common sense to do it. But I've done a test with a glue block. If it's correctly applied, a slight dish on your glue block here, perfectly flat on the piece that you're actually gluing to it. You put some glue around, let's say we were gluing that to this, glue around the outside of that onto there. And then when that has actually cured, then a bead right the way round. And I would say the wood will give way before the glue block, the glue join. And I've turned an 18-inch bowl on a glue block without any problem at all. So, and the great thing with glue blocks is, number one, they don't waste any wood, but if you've got little bits of wood and that, they're very easy. And these things you can just keep. I haven't actually, you see there, look, I knocked that off, and look, the wood is broken, but the glue block, the join is still there. So that's proof of the pudding. And then when it gets a bit low, all you've got to do is glue another piece of sacrificial wood to the base, and you've got another glue block. So that's the other method of holding. So again, any questions on that subject or on that? Yeah, fine. Bald Woodsman, button jaws, yeah. If I go to another camera, I don't know if it'll show it, it's a long way away, but if I put it up, button jaws like, right, can you see them? No, you can't, it's in the way. Sorry about this, this is on the fly. Right, that should be better. Yeah, you can just about see them. Okay, here are a set of button jaws for reversing bowls. They are great up to a point. I use them occasionally. I prefer to use a friction drive and turn away the foot, and you're left with a little nub. But yes, they're great, but you've got to have the right shape of bowl, because otherwise they've got nothing to purchase on. So unless you turn an awful lot of bowls, they're quite an investment, but I mean, I've had mine for a long time and I don't use them that often. I tend to just reverse the bowl, use a friction drive, put some in like this, which goes on to, I've had this one for years as well, it's a bit of padding, that goes on to the spindle, and then you press your bowl like so, and then you bring up your tailstock, which I will do on this because I'm going to do a little demo on shear scraping and so on, and then away you go. You can turn your foot off to a little nub and then sand it off. And the next, please, if there are ready. Yeah, it's okay. We'll have a little chat now because I've just got a couple more things to go through, really. Yeah. Oh yeah, Graham. Graham Light, yes. No. Right, Graham Light has asked whether I could explain the differences between shellac, acrylic sanding sealer, cellulose sanding sealer, and what was the other one? The cellulose, acrylic, shellac, and that's all. Yeah. And I said no. I've never used shellac. I use 9 times, well, not 9 times out of 10 times out of 10, I use a cellulose based sanding sealer. When you are using a paint, water-based paints, I believe that an acrylic sanding sealer is preferable, but I don't do colour. Ed Oliver's the man for that, and Martin Saban-Smith, Stuart Farini and others. For the work I do, call it work if you will, I use 99% of the time I will use cellulose sanding sealer, thin down with cellulose thinners. But I do have acrylic sanding sealer, but I've never used it. Ryan Hoyt, yes. Is there, right, Ryan Hoyt has asked, is there a preference over using a tenon or a mortise on a bowl? Or is it down to your personal preference? There are a few situations where a tenon is more, is safer. Ed Oliver actually was saying about this yesterday, and I hate to agree with him, but he's got more experience than me, but I still agree with him. I use a mortise quite a bit on sort of platters and things, because I personally quite like it with a rim for the foot. That's just me. But if I'm using a bit of wood that's possibly got some cracking, its integrity is in question, I will go with a tenon every time, because the tenon is compressing the fibres. And if it's wet wood, for example, one of the main things again with the newer turner, they don't seem to, it doesn't register, because why would it? When you're turning wet wood with a tenon, always check the security of that hold, because you're compressing the fibres anyway, but if it's wet wood, those fibres are softer than they would be if it was dry wood. So those fibres are going to much more readily compress, so that the grip will become looser. So when you're turning wet wood, it doesn't hurt every couple of minutes just to get the chuck key, and if it does move a bit, then you need it to tighten it. Be safe rather than sorry. But as I explained, if the integrity of the wood in the area of the tenon is suspect, I would always go with a tenon, personally. If you have got a crack in here, I mean, I've done it before, CA, bit of TLC, firm that tenon and the shoulder area before you actually place it on your chuck. A mortise, a lot of people don't like mortises. I haven't got a, personally, I can only speak, and I'm not a major bowl turner by any means, I've never had a problem with a mortise. All I will say is you must have, if you've if you're going to do a mortise there, forget this now, but if you're going to do a mortise or a recess there, you've got to make sure there's enough wood on the outside, where you've got the recess, that there's enough wood on the other side, because you're expanding. So if you've only got a very thin amount of wood there, it could actually just break out. So you need a good substantial backup for the expansion of the jaws to be able to purchase against, otherwise it will just blow it out. So, but there are advantages and disadvantages with each. Right, Shay, be turning. Oh, yeah, a very good point, Shay. And I was coming to end grain, funny enough, with faceplates, but I didn't mention it. But thanks for reminding me. Yes, a very good point. Shay, who turns a lot of bowls, never ever, if you're doing an end grain bowl, as opposed to most bowls are side grain, if you're doing an end grain bowl, never use a mortise, because the mortise will actually push the fibres apart. A very good point, and thank you very much for mentioning it, Shay. But a mortise on a traditional bowl is not a problem, but quite rightly. And the other thing to go back on, where we were talking about faceplates, I'm not a great exponent. I don't agree with faceplates on end grain either. Say you're doing a vase, an end grain vase, to mount that onto a faceplate, I think is asking for trouble, because it's end grain and the screws have really got nothing to grab hold of. Whereas if it's side grain, you get a much better grip and a much better purchase. Again, my opinion. But thanks again for that, Shay, a very valid point to make. Anything else, Mark? Yes, I can. Yeah. Oh, storage system. Yeah. Not really. Well, I can't really zoom in on those, funny enough. But somebody's asked about zooming in on that. All this is three-quarter ply. Yeah, three-quarter ply. And all I've done is cut. The backing is just been cut on the bandsaw. Whoops. And then where I need, I put little extensions on the little V's, and they just sit in there. If you bear with me 1 second, I'll just go off camera and I can show you, because I think I've got one here which I use for something else. There we go. Coming back. Don't shout about the camera, Mark. I know I'm off camera. Okay, there we go. That, if you like, is basically what that is. 45 degrees or 90 degrees, call it what you will. Whoops, there you go. And the jaws just slot in there, and you can make as many of the, if you need to go out with for longer jaws. I've just found that the best. I've tried various things, nails and God knows what else, and that really works. So there you go, that's what that is. So how are we doing? How are we doing for time? Oh, it's only been an hour, that's okay. If you have a little comfort break, 5 minutes, or shall we just carry on and me have a vape off camera and carry on with questions? We'll do that, shall we? Yeah. Okay. So Mark is keeping, well, I'm keeping an eye on it as well. Oliver's returning. Paddy B. Paddy B. And what is the grit of the Robert Sorby diamond belt? Oh, I'm glad Ed's here. Paddy's, yeah, 180 supposedly. Mind you, knowing Ed Oliver, he's taken a few diamonds off and sold them down the market, so there might be a couple missing. Sorry, Ed. Indeed, yeah. Mark is just saying that he's answering questions for me in the chat where he could, which is brilliant. Well, I don't know what everybody else thinks. I think this is working pretty well, considering it's our first time together, and I hope you're finding the experience good. I'm laughing at something that my earworm has said to me. Yes, I just see that. No, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ask me how I know this, but really, that, hang on, let's just zoom out a bit on this one. There we go. That is the most dangerous thing in the world. I did it. Let's zoom out a little bit more. There we go. Chuck key in the chuck. We've all done it. And I don't know what the situation was in actual fact, but it was in the early days, and it scared the life out of me. I'd left and it was it wasn't a closed chuck like this, it was the Clubman 100, which has the gear wheel is on the outside, if you like. And I left that like that, and I turned the lathe on, and it went flying. I mean, it didn't hit me, it just smacked. It didn't hit because the lathe was the other way round. So I was facing the wall and it hit the garage door. And that could have been me. So yeah, very good point there, Rob. Never leave the chuck key in the chuck. Nigel Oram, yeah. Yes, what I intend to do on this piece of cracked ash, I'm going to friction fit that, friction drive that, and I'm just going to do, I'm not a bowl turner, but I have turn bowls, but I will go through the difference between a pull cut, a push cut, a shear scrape and a shear cut on the outside of a bowl. I will actually do it as well on a piece of spindle as well. Where are we going to do tear out? We'll do tear out in a minute. I've done the glue blocks. Okay, before we go into the next segment, if there's no more questions, another question I get asked an awful lot, and I think a lot of people do, what is the right height for my tool rest? A very important point. And my stock answer is, it is not the tool rest height which is important. What is important is that with your turning style, no, I've messed that up a little bit. Yeah, with your turning style, by turning style I mean how low you have your handle normally, when you're comfortable, etc., is that your cutting edge must be either on or just slightly above centre. That is the, so if you're using a 3/8 spindle gouge to achieve that end, because it's smaller stock, your tool rest is going to have to be raised up a little bit. If you're using a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, then it's going to be lowered a little bit to achieve that maxim of turning on centre or just above. So it depends what tool you're using. The tool rest height is not, in the very beginning, I don't know if anybody else has done this, I used to have a what we call a hose clamp, a little hose clamp, and it was clamped on the tool rest. And I went down like this, and it was exactly on centre spindle height. Well, of course it's too high, because as soon as you put a tool on top of that, you've got to be turning a horizontal, and even then your cutting edge is going to be above centre point, too much above centre point. So it's not the tool rest that has to be at the centre, it's your cutting edge needs to be at centre. So that is my stock answer for tool rest height. Another thing is turning speed. Many people, with the advent, unfortunately I think, the advent of a lot of lathes now having speed readouts, whereas before you turned and you got a feel for what the right speed was for a particular piece of wood. Whereas now, people tend to get a little bit hung up on the fact, oh, I'm turning at, 300 RPM, I've got to be turning at 600 RPM, I've got to be turning at 2000 RPM. You don't have to turn at any speed. You turn at the speed, my stock answer to that as well is you turn at a speed at which you feel comfortable at. There are obvious advantages and disadvantages of turning at a higher speed. If you're turning at a, let's say, a speed commensurate with the wood you've got on the lathe, okay? Again, I stress I'm not a bowl turner per se, but I've heard bowl turners say there's absolutely no need to turn bowls. We're talking bowls 12, 14 inches, anything over 600 RPM. And there are mathematical things which explain how fast it's going and what happens. Jimmy Clues once said that if your bowl is turning at less than 1000 RPM, it will not take flight. It'll drop onto the lathe bed and then scoot off. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it sounds fair. I very rarely turn a bowl over 600-700 RPM. A smaller bowl may be a little bit faster, but a normal size bowl, 12, 14, 16, 18 inches, no need to go higher than that at all. Now, on spindle work, people say, what is the right... Again, it is the speed you're happy with. Should I go through the wobble? Quick answer, no. I have got a video out on wobble, and yes, you can go through the wobble, but it's not always necessary, and it's certainly not advisable, especially if you're a newer turner. Once you start to get vibration, back off. You only need to back off maybe by 10 RPMs, and then it will become stable. You don't want your lathe following your lathe around the garage or the workshop as it's bouncing around, and it's dangerous. So speed is important, but speed can be your friend in instances as well. If you're turning a piece that's well out of round and also well out of balance, it's clunkety 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 clunk. So your aim is to get it more in balance so you could increase the speed so that you are not cutting air, so the air is going across quicker, so you're cutting wood quicker as opposed to clunkety clunkety clunk. And my view is, if you cut too slowly with a piece that's not round, you increase the risk of catching because the air is over your cutting edge for longer, if you see my logic there. So speed commensurate to the type of wood you're turning and what you're turning. Okay, good, that's good. Well, people are getting bored if there's no questions then. Okay, we're going to go to yeah, I would say the next thing I'm going to do is tear out. Then I'll go on to the bowl. Again, a lot of questions. How can I stop tear out? Well, there was a question about it earlier on. I think Graham actually mentioned tear out. There are two factors, in my opinion, which are relevant, or three factors actually. The first, and I'll change the camera and we'll just go to this this piece. This is a piece of very dry, punky, and by punky I mean soft and what have you, spalted beech. So it's very difficult to get a good finish on spalted beech, especially on the end grain. So what I'm going to show you here is what causes, in my opinion, or the causes, several causes of tear out. And we'll go a bit closer now with the old camera. Whoops, that's further out. I do need a cameraman, I think. Right, can you... is that okay? Yeah. That's better. Go in a bit further. Right, you can see the tear out here, I hope. Yeah, you can see the little holes and what have you. Okay, so one of the main problems of tear out, let's say on this end grain piece here, this spalted beech, is not sharp tools, believe it or not. If your tools aren't sharp, you ain't going to get a good surface. And the next thing is moving your tool. I did this on another demo a few months ago. Moving your tool across the work too quickly for the speed of the piece. Your aim is to get from there to the centre, allowing the wood to come down onto the surface. Now if I get my cut there, it's not going to be wonderful curls because we've got spalted beech, but you can see I'm getting shavings. I'm doing about, I don't know, 15 RPM. So you can cut the wood at that speed. I'm just using the bevel as a guide. I just want to get to centre, I want to get up a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this at, I'm talking as slow as I'm turning. Okay, 250 RPM. Okay. Now we want to we wouldn't be doing it that quickly, that slowly, but I'm going to go across here at a stupid speed for the speed of the piece. Okay, so I'm not allowing the wood time, I'm pushing through the wood. I'm not allowing the time for the wood to come down on the surface. I mean, that's going to be a really, hopefully, that's about my style actually. Now look at that. I mean, that has really caused major tear out, as you'd expect it to, and it's a freshly sharpened tool. Okay, now if I turn the speed up, that means I can go across, I can traverse that piece of wood that much quicker. Yeah, you'd agree with that, hopefully. So again, just a light cut. I'm not going to do anything major on this one, but I'm going at 900 RPM, which is still not that quick, but you can see my traverse across the piece is much slower. I'm allowing the wood to come on to the edge, and I'm using no pressure, well, just very small pressure to get across the wood, but when it cuts the wood and it wants to move forward, it goes forward. Now when you get to the centre, or towards the centre, the wood is going to be spinning a lot slower than on the outside or the circumference. So slow your rate of travel and just nice and gently into the middle and take off the little nub. Just let it curl down onto the, it's there, done. Now it's not going to be a perfect surface, but I think the camera will pick up that it's a much better surface than it was before, and the total reason for that is going across the face at a speed commensurate with the revolutions of your piece, and be mindful always when you're approaching the middle to slow up. So if you're going at that speed, you want to go slower and slower and slower till you get to the middle, because it's going that much slower. Now I could turn this up to 2,500 revs and go across here to there. Don't see the point in doing that. I'm not here to prove how clever or how stupid I am, but believe you me, I do turn at 2,000 revs quite often. Shut up, Mark. Mark's laughing in my ear hole because he knows I'm stupid, you see. The point, I'm just going to go back to my face for a second. The point I'm making here is not for me to show you how to turn at 3,000 RPM. That is not the point. The point of the exercise is to show you and prove to you, the newer turner, that if you approach things methodically and think, right, okay, if I want to get from A to B, if I do it slowly and steadily, then you're going to get a much better ride, as it were, than you'd want to get there quick. Okay, and the point I'm making is that the speed is important, but only important relative to the speed of your travel across the tool rest or across your wood. So if this might not work on this, but it did on the last demo, if I turn the speed right down, again I was turning at 900 RPM there to get that surface. If I turn it down to say 300 RPM, okay, and I must probably regret doing this, and then if I want to go across to the middle again, this is how I've got to go across there. I know it's boring, but I'm trying to make a point. I won't do the whole cut, but to hopefully keep the surface in almost the same condition. That's the sort of travel I've got to apply, and I think, yeah, that's proved it. Well, that little line is there. It is the same condition as it is in there, and I was turning at a third of the speed, but then I was travelling across the rest at a third of the speed, possibly even a bit less. So that is my answer to the question. It's not always the answer, but it is. There are three possibilities in my view to begin with. Sharp tools are essential. Number two, the speed at which you are spinning the wood, and possibly more important, the speed at which you're travelling across that wood. Let the wood come down onto the edge. Don't try and force it. You're not in a race. Says the man who started going very quick when I did my first live demo, because I was really quite nervous. Although I'm in my own workshop, I was in my own workshop, and I was really trying to rush everything. I'm not a Wayne the wood turner. I'm not a speed merchant. Never have been, never will be. And my hat goes off to the people that can turn quickly and well. I turn slow and badly, you see, so I've got an excuse. Okay, so that's the tear out on end grain. We get the same problems with bowls, I know. I'm not a bowl turner, but I was asked by somebody to show the difference between a pull cut, a push cut, a pull cut, a shear scrape and a shear cut. And I think that will actually, apart from bevel angles, which again is a moot point with a lot of people, that is basically what I'm going to cover, and then we'll take any questions afterwards. So if before I go on to the push cut and pull cut, are there any questions? Yeah, good. No, I'm not qualified to talk about chainsaws. I have one, but I'm sure I don't use it safely. Definitely. Mark has just said there, if you get a chainsaw, don't watch YouTube, get a chainsaw course, because believe you me, they will cut your leg off quicker than you can blink. They're a wonderful tool if in the right hands, but you've got to get the chaps. You've got to, get the chaps on your legs, what they call the chaps, for protection against on your legs. Your Kevlar vests to do it properly. I'm not saying we all do that, but they're very dangerous, very effective, but a very dangerous tool. Okay. Okay, we'll have a quick little break, and then we'll crack on the last piece, or the last bit. It's like I can hear Mark vaping in my ear, you see, and he's making me want to do it myself. It's not fair. Oh, that's all right then. I've just been reliably told by my earworm that Ed Oliver has been put in his place by Pete and Mark and Rob, which is good, because he deserves it. Thanks very much, Graham. You take care, mate. That is Cunning Stunts. That is, I've got to be very careful saying that. That's Graham Light, my mate, from the Lincolnshire Wood Turning Association. Okay, now I'm going to change the camera and zoom it out a bit, and then oh yeah, Dave Rowe's got a question. Yes, Dave. Right. Oil, sawdust and crud. Right, okay, best thing to clean it with. I use this Excalibur I've had this can for about 6 months, no, 9 months I should say. It's nearly empty now, and it's a PTFE. No, I don't use that at all. That's absolute rubbish. Sorry, stay as you were. I've got the wrong thing. That's what I use to get the crud off, the blade and bit cleaner, because the crud that's on there is the sap that's collected on your jaws, which shouldn't really collect on there because you won't get a good seating on it, as Martin of Gentle Turn pointed out last week. But yeah, this blade and bit cleaner, not to say that it doesn't have to be this manufacturer, but a blade and bit cleaner will clean them up a treat. Methylated spirits might do if it's not too bad. But the worst thing to do is get something like a load of sandpaper or whatever, because you've got to alter the profile. So don't do that. Just use solutions of some sort, in my view, and a stiff wire brush or copper brush possibly. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Yes, Paul Morris has asked, would I advise some protective clothing like a smock or whatever? Yes, it doesn't have to be a smock. Some sort of material that doesn't allow the shavings to cling so much. I mean, with this you can get stuff on there, and I don't know what, it's sort of a very hard cotton, rough cotton I believe, or polyester mix of cotton, but what happens is that the shavings, you do that and they come off. But some of the stuff that I wear in the winter, you know, you do that and it just sticks to it. So yes, the only reason is keeps your clothes clean. I mean, in the summer I very often just turn in a t-shirt, you know, just a t-shirt, but it's for personal cleanliness with regards to not having dust everywhere on your body or on your clothes. Just wearing a smock, in my opinion. It's not for safety as such. And if you do wear a smock or anything, short sleeves, make sure you don't have long sleeves, and if they are long, make sure they're tight fitting cuffs. Yeah, I touched on this earlier on. If I'm going to do wet turning, which I do quite a bit, I use machine wax, or you can use, I can bring it out again now, a PTFE dry spray. Some people use WD-40. I personally don't like using it, but you know, there's no problem with that. And I have actually in the past literally got a towel and draped the towel, especially if I'm turning wet oak, because that will turn everything black. I will spray the chuck, any metal around the area that's likely to be splashed, I will spray with that PTFE, and I have been known to put a towel over the bedways to protect the bedways, because believe me, it's amazing with wet oak. If you're turning wet oak, it'll go black before you know it. So yes, protect your bedways, or buy a Robust which has got aluminium bedways. You don't have to worry then. I wish. Stainless steel, sorry, not just say aluminium. I did stainless steel bedways, so they won't rust. Aluminium wouldn't either, but it most probably collapse. Yeah, go on. Okay, so that seems to be it. Right, so we will now change the camera again, and it's not looking a bit washed out, isn't it? That's better. I can't see, but you can see better. Okay, I was asked last week actually in a message, and I have had a lot of questions regarding this, and the bowl turners amongst you will have a good laugh now, because I'm not a bowl turner, but what I'm going to do is to take my chuck off and put a friction drive on. This friction drive I made years ago when I used the Beal tap, and I've got the M33 tap, and it's a piece of oak beneath here, then there's some shelf liner, and for good measure I just put a bit of linen or cloth on there as well, and that screws directly onto my spindle. And then we bring up Mr. Tailstock. I might get rid of my cheek notes now, because they're all done. And live centre in the tailstock, which you can't see. Yes, you can just about see it. And this is a bit of a demo piece now because it's got a crack in it, and I mean I might turn something out of it for the workshop but not for anybody else. And then literally just bring up your live centre into the centre hole there, and just that's it, and it should be running fairly true. It could be a bit truer than that. Not perfect, but it'll do. You can all have a laugh now when it goes flying. Okay, this is the time where normally I would put on a face mask, but because I've got various microphones and headphones, it's just going to be the old safety specs. Now I want to look at the overhead as well. Let's just have a quick look, see if that's going to be, that needs to, that's better. Just a bit of camera work here, if you don't mind. Sorry about this, doing this on the fly. Yeah, I should give a fairly good view. Okay, so the difference between a pull cut, a push cut, and a shear scrape and a shear cut. Right, what I'm going to do first is a pull cut. So again, we want to be cutting approximately on centre. This is a 3/8. That was a half-inch spindle gouge. We'll get our 3/8 bowl gouge. Okay. Now a pull cut. A lot of the time you will pull, you'll get a better surface with a push cut, but a good way of getting rid of initial hogging of wood is a pull cut, and you can be quite aggressive with a pull cut. Now you want your handle quite low, and the idea is to be engaging from the nose to begin with, just about 3 or 4 mil to the left of the nose, and the idea is to bring this around. Okay, so again we're turning, it's not very centre unfortunately, but nevertheless it's just doing the job for the demo. And your pull cut will bring you more wood away, so you're hogging wood now, basically coming around the corner using your left wing. So that's got rid of quite a bit of wood. We're not looking at surface finish here, and it's a good way of moving wood. So you're just putting, sorry? See you, Ed, thanks very much for coming, mate, appreciate it. So you're just taking, moving your body and coming round, and you can see the shaving hopefully coming off sort of the third of the left wing. Now a push cut, so a pull cut basically is when you're pulling the tool towards you and pulling, hence the pull cut. Now a push cut is this way, where you're actually behind the tool and you're pushing the tool. So if we take it, sorry my headphones are falling off. Ugh. Right, if we take it, just move the tool rest slightly. If you watch Mark on his lives, and Wayne and Martin, they're bowl turners, and they turn bowls. Wayne turns so effortlessly, I have to really concentrate when I'm doing my pull cuts, because I want to try and do a Jimmy Clues and do a pull cut all the way from here to there, because you get a really good finish. But this is a push cut. I meant a pull cut, sorry. I meant a push cut. This is a push cut where you are standing behind the tool and you are pushing away from you. Riding the bevel's a term I don't like. Floating the bevel, using the bevel as a guide, lifting your handle. Let's start down here, shall we? So we can show it the difference. Start your cut, lift your handle and follow the contour around, moving your body. And moving the tool rest after stopping the lathe obviously, and carrying on doing no pressure from this hand apart from downward pressure, and then moving yourself around like so, and that is a push cut. Not brilliant tool control, but I can assure you that the surface on this part here is better. It's rough here and it is smooth here. It's a much better finish off the tool if you do a push cut. But as I say, Jimmy Clews, and actually I keep saying Jimmy Clews, I meant Stuart Batty, not Jimmy Clews, Stuart Batty. But Wayne, when he does, he as soon as he can, he goes into a pull cut. But it is Wayne the Woodturner. You watch some of his videos, and he's effortless. But the pull cut is the one, and I understand that Wayne's tutelage, it certainly shows in Mark's turning, this earworm fellow, because he has got great tool control as well. Now the other question is the difference between shear scraping and shear cutting. Well, if you're shear scraping with your bowl gouge, you're using this part, the lower wing, and what you're doing basically just on centre height, when you're vertical, you're using, and I'm showing you as I hope you can see, you basically are using it vertically, just without that top wing. You're engaging the bottom wing and you're keeping the top wing obviously away from the surface of the wood, and you will get, if you follow it round, you can see already I'm getting quite nice little shavings, and it's a great way of removing tool marks. Now I fell off that a bit, I went a bit too much, so go back again, keeping that top wing just away from the surface of the wood. Follow the contour round, and you can see it's a little bit powdery, but it's quite fine shavings and a good way of getting rid of tool marks. I'm dropping my tool rest a bit now, and we're now going to do a shear cut. Now a shear cut is slicing the fibres, and a low tool handle, and you're basically getting that that part of your wing at 45 degrees or near as you can, so you're slicing the fibres. So just nice, no pressure, right in your bevel, and just lifting the handle slightly and bringing it around. Now you can immediately see I'm getting a nicer shaving, nice angel hairs of shaving, and that is a shear cut as opposed to a shear scrape. Look at those shavings again, coming round, and hopefully the camera will pick that up. Quite a nice surface there as well. We've got a bit of a CA TL seed crack there, because I say this is a demo piece, but that gives you an idea of the different cuts. So the difference between a shear scrape, where you're actually scraping the wood, with a shear cut like that, you're cutting the wood, slicing the fibres, which will give you a better finish. So that, I think, I'll just check my cheat sheet. I don't like working from cheat sheets. Bevel angles, and then I can just take questions. But bevel angles, again, it's a very personal thing with bevel angles. Most, I've got to do me zip up, I've got shavings everywhere. Most companies will ship their tools at 45 degrees, because that's sort of a benchmark bevel angle. I could talk all night about bevel angles. I've practiced, I've done this, I've done that, and to be honest with you, it is down to the personal experience and your personal taste for your style of turning. I know that saying that always sounds like you're getting out of the question, but when I'm asked that question, I always say don't get too hung up on angles when you start. Just take your basic angles, get used to those, and your experience will then tell you where the shortfalls are, and then you can start researching what's the best angle, because there is no magic formula. You can have the best angle that people reckon you can have on your gouge, but if you haven't got the right turning style and haven't got tool control, no bevel angle in the world is going to help you. That's what you've got to work on first, in my opinion, and then start to tweak it to get the best benefits that you can from the tool in hand. So that's my take on bevel angles in very précis form. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will now take any questions and have a drink of Coke and possibly have a vape. And I'd like to thank Mark as well very, very much for not falling asleep. Yeah. He's still here. I can hear him snoring. He's either that or he's watching Animal Farm, one of the two. Are you still using the Sorby Pro Edge? Man with 2 feet. I'm glad you've still got 2 feet. Are you still using your Sorby Pro Edge? Oh yes, very much so. I haven't got my CBNs anymore. The Pro Edge for me is the ultimate sharpening machine for me. Keep an eye on the questions. Cook. Silver. Stuart. I actually, well, I have to be honest, that is the one I normally use. The black. As you might well know, if you were on a Wood Turning 360 meeting some months ago. But I will warn you, don't put embellishing wax on your beard, because believe me, it does stings your skin a bit. Alright, okay. Oh, Jim. Hello, Jay. Sorry, I just want to say hello to Jim, my old mate Jim, James Revival. What was the question again? Sorry, Mark. The bottom of a deep bowl. Okay, again, I'm not a bowl turner, but my bowl gouges are around, again, don't get too hung up on angles, my bowl gouges are around the 50-55 degree mark for normal turning. And I have this little fella, which is at 60 degrees, straight over grind, and as you can see, there's hardly the bevel. Well, it's very, very steep, but I very rarely use it because I don't turn that many deep bowls. But I was told by somebody, yeah, you want a bottom feeder, so I went and turned that bevel on it, and I have used it, and it's very effective. Because what basically happens is, if you're using, let's say, 50 degrees, and you've got a deep bowl, you can't get your handle around, the bevel will start to rise when you go around that bottom bend. So if you have a steeper bevel, then you will maintain your bevel contact, and I say contact, not rubbing, but bevel contact, to complete the turn around the bowl. But I very rarely use it because I very rarely turn that deep bowls. So hopefully that answers the question. But again, it's a very personal thing, depending on your turning style. Yeah, that's the same as mine, which means mine has got to be wrong then if it's the same as yours. Mark's saying his is 60 degrees as well. Paul Morris, any tips when you get tear out, how to get out of it to get a clean surface? I have actually just shown that, Paul, on the spindle. Three factors initially. Obviously wood plays a part if it's punky wood, like I just showed in the demo there, but sharp tools and traverse across the wood at a speed commensurate with the RPMs you're doing, allowing the wood to come onto the edge. Don't force that edge through, because you basically start pulling the fibres out as opposed to cutting them and slicing them. So slow and sure. Speed, I'll say as fast as you can, as fast as you're happy with for the piece, and your traverse across that slow. to allow the wood to come on and slice those fibres, and it will dramatically reduce the tear out that you get. Douglas Munger, Mr. Walter Mark, tonight has been an eye-opener for me. Thank you both ever so much. That's great. You're going to take up knitting then, are you, Douglas? Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Sebastian. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Sorry. Gareth Silk, oh, he's a Welshman. I suppose I better answer his question. Would you use a shear cut on the inside of a bowl or goblet? No. I have tried it. It can be done. People do it. But when I used to do it, I used to get a catch. So I don't do a shear cut on the inside. I use a negative rake scraper. But I could say I don't need to use anything because my tool control is so perfect I don't get any marks. So it was straight to sanding. But no, if I do have to iron anything out, I tend to go with a negative rake scraper because I find that very effective. Thanks, Peter. Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, I'm glad everybody's thanking Mark, because without him I would have lost or missed a lot of questions. I think we worked pretty well together, and I think well, I don't think, I know we did. I'm very happy with it. I've got to get used to having this thing on my head, but nevertheless, I think it works very well. I tell you what I'm going to do. I don't care. I'm going to have a vape online, and I don't care. Andy Cloneckley, that's all right, mate. Take care. Thanks for coming along. I appreciate it. Thank you, Bill. I'm glad you enjoyed it, sir. Peter O'Donnell, thank you. I think I did thank you actually, but I'll thank you again. Kaylee DeBoer, hey Mike, I know you said you never done a wand last live. I would love to see you try one. Maybe. When I say I've never turned a wand on camera, I have turned a wand. I think Carl Jacobson was my inspiration many years ago, but they're not something that really turns me on as such. But maybe turn a wand one day on film. I'll ignore that comment, Douglas. Thanks very much, Gav. Take care. Thanks for coming along, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you, James. Appreciate it, mate. Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I think I will, Paul Dowling. Thank you very much. Glad you enjoyed it, Vincent. Thank you. Mark is the best earworm, says Brian. Oh, hang on. Look, can you see my... Look, they're getting bigger because Mark's head's getting bigger and I can't keep my earphones on. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for coming, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you, Frederick. I'm going to ignore that comment and all, Jim. Mike, they don't have any magic for you. Oh, that is pathetic. Thank you, Colin Izzard. Cheers, mate. Mark is thanking you all as well in his heart. Steve Jeremiah, thank you, Steve. You take care, mate. Thanks, Dave Bamford. At what point would you use either of the shear cuts? Basically, if I've got tear out on the outside of a bowl, I use the shear cut. So I use it quite often. No, use the shear cut. And if it's just a tool mark, you know, I've got a little ridge or something, then I'll have a bash with the shear scraping. But, you know, as I say, I'm one of these turners. Luckily, I'm not making a living. Luckily, I'm not making a living out of it. I'll be begging on the street. But I can practice different things on one item. I don't have to stick with the same thing, so I practice various things, and it's really how it takes me. But the shear cut is a really great way of getting rid of tear out on the outside of a bowl, in my experience. Thanks, David Nicol. Glad you enjoyed it. Cheers, Stuart. Thanks for coming along, mate. Appreciate it. Okay, Kaylee, enjoy your supper. Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, still waiting for the colouring, Mark. You were supposed to brainwash him into getting the intrinsics out. I've got them here, Pete, as you know, and I've got a lovely piece of wood at the back here with my efforts on it, but you just keep quiet, Pete. Whoops, look, my headphones are falling off again. I'll have to get headphones built into my you can get ear defenders with the radios in them, so I don't see why you can't connect your phone. Thank you, Shay, and thanks very much for your comment on the mortise as well. Very pertinent. Thanks, Shay. All the very best, mate. I know you're a busy man. Thanks very much. Hello, Ronnie. Quick question. When you wet turn a bowl, do you turn the tenon a little bit? Yes, so you can turn the tenon the right size when the bowl is dry. Ronnie is saying, do I turn the tenon on a wet bowl a bit bigger than it should be? Yes, I do, because it will warp, it'll go oval, so you need to leave yourself enough meat on there, enough wood on there to be able to turn it round and get it into your jaws. Good point, and thank you for mentioning that, Ronnie. Oh, Mick Strand, good evening. Sorry you're late, you were watching, delivered with Kleenex. Yeah, I do know why. Yeah. Did Wales lose to Italy, did they? Well, I'm never going to eat any more pasta, although I love the stuff. That's all right, Jim. Jim is apologising that he was late tonight. Very rude. I didn't want you here anyway, Jim, so it's no loss to me, mate. I am kidding, you know that. I'm not sure what's happening next week, to be honest with you. I won't know till about Friday, because I might be back at work, so it all depends. I'll know by the middle to the end of this week whether they want me back on duty or not. If not, I'll be here. Adrian has asked me what my favourite thing is to turn. This is going to be a very crass answer. I enjoy turning everything, actually. I just enjoy putting the tools to the wood. I suppose my favourite thing has to be a goblet, and very close is wet bowl turning, rough turning wet bowls. I haven't really... The one thing I haven't got into is segmenting. I'm not into that whatsoever. I love the results, but not into it. So I would say goblets, bowls, and boxes possibly. So everything. I do like hollowing, hollow forms as well. I've really got into that in a big way lately. I love me hollow forms as well. Marco Pasquale, how do you manage the dust in the shop? It seems that you have a nice and tidy wall behind you, while my shop is covered in dust even if I have an air filter. I clean it regularly, and I'm not being rude saying that. There is dust here, obviously there is. Well, I got dust filtration, which to the size of the garage I got, which is 20 by 15, it recirculates the air I think it's every half an hour to an hour, 3/4. So that's the fine particles. If I do any sanding, I've got my dust extraction on all the time, and that's it really. And then a hoover. I come round with a hoover. So that's all I can say really. The angles on my negative rakes. Right, who asked that question? Sorry. Oh, John Maguire. Hello, John. I've got several because I got hung up with negative rake scraping. If you put a relief angle on anything, it'll give you a negative rake effect. A lot of the time, people will just use a standard scraper angle. And then just put, say, 60, 70 degrees, and then put something like a 20-degree relief bevel on top, which I have on my small one. I have found, and I must probably again get slated, just a personal thing, I got a couple of lovely negative rake scrapers from Simon Hope, and they're superb, they really are. However, my favourite negative rake scraper is my old 1-inch round nose scraper that I turned into a negative rake scraper, and it's got 35 on both angles. I love this, and the edge doesn't last long because, as I said earlier on, the more acute your angle, the less time it's going to last. But this thing is brilliant. So I found about 35 I think is brilliant, and I can't say a lot more than that really. That's the angle I like, and the other ones work as well, but if you put a negative, put a little relief angle on your scraper and you will find an immense difference in user friendliness and indeed the finish. Much easier to use at a standard scraper. Yeah, well, Mark is saying he uses a 60-30. Each to his own, but negative rake I won't say is the way to go, but negative rake is certainly a great tool to have in your armoury. Thank you, Brian Flood, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for coming, appreciate it. Sebastian, good night everybody, and good night to you, sir. Thank you very much for coming along. Spindle turning. I like my 1/2 inch spindle gouge, my 3/8 spindle gouge, but I do love using the skew when it works right for me. There is no doubt in my mind, Rob, that the skew gives the finest finish of any tool in the box. And it's the most probably the most versatile tool in the box, but I just haven't spent enough time at it. I do use it for planing cuts and for roundovers and stuff like that, but I do love my spindle gouges in comparison, basically because that's what I've done more work with. Thank you, Douglas, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Take care and good night to you. Is Harrogate show planned? Yeah, apparently, Jim, it is. It is planned for November, so I'm told. So providing COVID behaves itself, there's every chance it might be on this year. Manjit, hello there. Welcome. A bit late, but better late than never. Nice to see you, Manjit. Thank you, Martin. That's very kind of you. Okay, John, my pleasure. April Fister, are you sure you want us to give him a thumbs up? Not sure, I don't recognise the name, April. Where are you from? Hello, Gareth. Thanks very much. Cheers, mate. Thanks, Rob. I've got a feeling, might be wrong. April Fister, can you say something again? Because I've got a feeling that you're a bit of a scammer. Maggie Billier, hello there. How are you? That's okay, Maggie. Not a problem. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I might be very wrong here, but I'm afraid I'm just going to remove you. April Fister, you are gone. I've just got a feeling the name is not right, and neither is his comment. Well, I mean, I don't want to have a thumbs up if people don't want to, but April Fister, don't you think that's a little bit of a... Yeah. Okay. Paul Morris, Mike, for a newer turner, would it be too early to invest in more expensive cryo-hardened tools? By the way, thank you for another great... Well, it's very kind. No, my pleasure. Thank you for coming, Paul. I think I said at the beginning when, about sort of what lathe do I need, what tools do I need. Get the best you can, your budget will allow. That's something I learned in the very early days, that I regret going on the cheaper end to begin with. If you're sure you enjoy the craft, then you will get many years of sterling service from better quality tools and machinery, no doubt about it. I always make this comparison. I've got two Bosch Professional, one impact drive and a drill, because I use them an awful lot. But things like, I don't know, something I don't use very often, I will go cheap, because it's going to do the job once maybe, but that's all I want it to do. I don't want it to go on forever and ever. And the same thing with tools and machinery for turning. Normally, if it's from a reputable manufacturer, the more expensive are better. That's my argument. Yep. Oh, sorry, April, you must accept my humble apologies. You'll most probably never speak to me again. But I did have confirmation from my earworm that he agreed with my sentiments, so I'll apologise. I blame my earworm for not really keeping tabs on things. Absolutely, you just can't get the staff, and he can't argue with you because you can't hear him. No, I'm not listening to you. That's okay, April. Yes, you can. Okay, April, I hope you do honestly accept my sincere and humble apologies. Michael Stratton, Mike only likes the 3530 because he then has to remember which way. Yeah, yes, I do, actually, Pete. And you know what? Which way do I know he's up? Because he's got the... So I only ever sharpen that one. But yeah, I know I bang on about negative rate, but it's the best thing I ever found, personally. Am I forgiven? You say no biggie, it is a biggie. You chuck someone off, it's disgraceful. I apologise again. Rob, I didn't think it mattered what grinds are used on a negative rake. I'm not knowledgeable, just assumed. To say it matters, Rob, it doesn't really matter. I think it's what you find works for you. If you're an idiot like me, I've tried all the different angles, and my favourite is 35-35, but I also enjoy using my 60-25. So, you know, it is what it is. Whatever you're happy with, that's the one to go with. Again, it goes back to my old comment about you ask one question, you ask 10 turners a question, you're going to get 13 different answers. And that's what the craft is about. Everybody has their preferences. There is no hard and fast rule. I wouldn't accept his apology, April, because he doesn't mean it. When Mark, the gentleman Woodturner, says he's sorry, he doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean it. He's not genuine like me. Yeah, he's calling me all the names under the sun, and I quite agree with him. I am. If nothing else, thanks, Patrick Bowers. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, sir. Martin, General Turn, thank you for your valuable, it's not valuable time, but support and beginners. No, it's my pleasure, mate. That's what it's all about. Good night, and I hope to see you very soon. Same to me, same to you, Martin. Whoops, I'm falling over. Thanks very much for coming, mate. I appreciate it. Yes. Rob, for those of you who missed, have said, ask him a question, he'll give 13 different answers. Yeah, you're not one to sit on the fence, you, Rob. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Right. What do you reckon? Another 10 minutes, Mark? Can you stay awake that long? That's okay. Yeah, I can imagine. Hey, imagine I've got you in my ear, mate. That's really making it. It's like taking an aspirin. I have to say, and Mark has mentioned it on a few occasions on his channel as well, that we are brothers in arms, because Mark is an ex-bus driver. Although he makes us believe that it's because of ill health he doesn't drive buses anymore. He was just such a bad driver they didn't want him anymore. The people of Cornwall, I mean, it was a bit like sort of, you know, Wyatt Earp walking down the centre of the town, you know, lock up your daughters and your dogs and everything else. But it was exactly the same. When Mark was actually behind the wheel, people actually drove on the pavement because it was safer, you know. You know what they say, speak as you find. Pete Twisted Tree, I think that the right angle for the negative rake is mostly about the thickness of the tool. It's getting that cutting edge in a comfortable, good view position. Yeah, you're right, Pete. Pete Twisted Tree is a very accomplished turner as well, and I really do respect his opinion, although he's always wrong. I respect his opinion, but he puts an amazing amount of input in, and he's a very, very welcome addition to the wood turning world, unlike Mark, who's in my ear. Thank you, Jim. That's very kind of you, mate. I appreciate it. Thank you. You are a gentleman, unlike the person in my ear. I might actually go back on what I said at the beginning about trying to work on something where you can actually see Mark on occasion and hear him as well. I think I've burned that boat. I don't think he'll want to be seen. Oh dear. Kieran Johnson, I'd just like to say thank you. It's my pleasure. That's excellent. I'm really pleased to hear that, Kieran. Excellent. That's good. My job is done. If one person is converted to the craft, even only temporarily, I feel that my job is complete. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Who were the turners you mentioned that can do the push cut? Would like to watch some of them. Me? Sorry. Dear. Wayne the wood turner is one. Mark, the gentleman wood turner, the guy in my ear, is good at the push cut. But I'm taking nothing away from Wayne or anybody else. If you put in Stuart Batty, he has I think it's something like a 2-hour demo in the States, and it's on YouTube with his famous 40-40 grind. Watch that man and aspire to turn like him, but he explains everything in the nth degree. An excellent video. I must have watched that 4 or 5 times, and I still can't do a 40-40 grind by hand, and I could do a push cut, but I don't do enough bowls. But I enjoy, yeah, but that's the one. Mike, does the square bar 8mm Hope carbide hollower fit into a Hope quick release handle? No, it does not. But I have it in it'll fit in a grub screw handle. So I've actually got it in a grub screw handle, but it will not. It won't tighten up on the quick release. It's a great tool, actually, not just for hollowing. You get a nice. You can push cut and pull cut with that as well, because it's 45 degrees on a square bar. It's really good. Just put on a 40-40 grind. Oh, well done, Hodgepodge. Great man. Good man. I think if I did a lot of bowls, I most probably would go down that route, but I don't. So I just struggle along with what I've got. Yeah, I can imagine. What's his name? Can't remember his name. Oh yeah, Mark. Mark has just said in my ear that Wayne has just started using a 40-40 grind, and he's no quicker. He's the only turner I know that can actually finish a bowl before he's actually started it. He's that quick. Ian in the shed, good evening, how are you? Better late than never, mate. Excuse my sarcasm. Nice to see you, Ian. A quick yes or no. As my regular viewers that are here and still here, and I'm very appreciative of it, have you felt that the experience is better, which I'm sure it has been, having me having an earworm and missing a lot less questions than I would have had Mark not been in my ear? And I'm not asking for applause or anything, it's just a case of I'm hoping that the format is more enjoyable for you. It's a pain for me, but as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Yes, I am, Ian. I've almost finished, mate. I'm afraid. How long has Mark been turning? Since April 2019. So really, just over a year and a bit, really. Almost 2 years, and he's a better turner than I am after 10 years, which is not difficult. I talk a good turn, you see. I talk a good turn. Anyway, yeah, I've got to ignore that. Pete says yes, would be even more so if you were at the lathe more. It's obviously answering a question I missed. Thank you, Nathan, I appreciate that. Hello, Lightning Strike Woodworking. Glad you're enjoying it. Caitlin, how are you? Okay, love. You take care, love. Nice to see you. Thanks for popping in. Okay, Richard. Yeah, I did start doing that in the end. Yes, I appreciate that. But as I say, it's a bit excuse. It's new to me. If you don't know what's going on in my ear, then obviously you don't know what I'm answering. But I think in the end I managed to do that. Towards the end anyway. Thank you, Barry. Going back a bit. Thank you very much. Glad you enjoyed it. Yes, we're going to work on that, Stuart. Stuart's actually said that it would be even better if we can work a way out of Mark being seen and indeed heard on occasion too. Very rarely, but on occasion. Yeah, we're going to work on that, aren't we, Mark? Yes. Yes, he says yes, if you insist. But yes, we're going to work on it. I think actually... all right, thank you, Pete. Yeah. Are you free for a quick chat sometime this week, Pete? Just answer yes or no, or keep away. Steve Jeremiah said it's the same as me. He's been having funny turns for years. Yeah, you're not alone there, mate. Both in the workshop and out of it. I'll ignore that, Mark. I don't even know what was happening, so I don't know what you've been doing. I just came on. Well, I tell you what, Lightning Strike Woodworking, I don't know what's happening half the time either. It will be on YouTube, and I'll get slated for vaping on YouTube. But yes, it will be on YouTube. If you go to my channel, Lightning, if you want to, you can fast forward through the boring bits, which is 95% of it. But I've covered things like basic lathes, tools, tool presentation, work holding, just my opinions on them, and various other things to do with the newer Turner. So if you're interested, pop along and have a look at the video when it goes up in about an hour or so. It'll be there forever for you to get bored with. Okay, Pete, that's brilliant. I'm not sure what day, mate, but I'll give you a bell on Messenger and then maybe we can have a video chat. Just want to ask you a couple of questions, if I may, with your immense IT knowledge. No, I just want to ask a couple of questions following on what Mark has said, actually, the other day. Don't think I've missed any questions now. Just we'll give it a 9:45, I think, Mark, and then I'll say good night to everybody, I think. Well, for those of you that are left, I'd just like to thank you all for coming, and yeah, Rob is saying, how come Mike doesn't want to chat with me? I didn't know you wanted to chat, Rob. Chat away, mate. Oh right, sorry. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to say a word. I've got to say, Rob, CP, there's something that was going to come out, but I managed to catch it on the tip of my tongue. James Woodville, Mike, do you ever do any shows in Somerset area? I don't do live demos, actually, Jim. I've done a couple, but I'm too old to travel now. I can't. It sounds very coy, but I have been asked on several occasions, more than once, to go up and down the country, but it's not for me, I'm afraid. Oh yeah, yeah. My ear is telling me that I should mention my very first live demo in front of, I don't know, about 140 people maybe. Was at UKIS, which was the UK and Ireland Woodturning Symposium that was started back in 2016. May come back at some time in the future, but we don't know yet. And I did an off-centre goblet, which I had done many of in the comfort of my own home, and it went flying. But I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Thanks for that, Mark. General question for everyone: who will be going to Makers if it goes ahead in August? A lot of people ask me about Makers Central. I have been to two. It's very unlikely that I'd be going, not because I don't like it, and it's purely and simply it's not specific enough for me, and if I'm working and do get time off, I want to go to more wood turning orientated, like Harrogate and others similar, so it's unlikely. Steve Jeremiah, are you coming down to Simon Hope's this year? I certainly hope so. Again, when I can arrange it with work and when Simon is actually open to receive, definitely. I definitely want to see his new workshop, and I want to be able to take the mick out of him in person instead of just over the phone when I speak to him. Yes, definitely, Steve, and we'll get together, hopefully, on that visit. Yeah, okay, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be 3 more minutes and then I got to say good night. Harrogate is just down the road from me. Oh, that's lucky. So we'll hopefully be going to that if it's on in November, I think. Yeah, if it is, I'll look forward to seeing you there, Ian. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I know I said 3 minutes, but I honestly think that we'll give you... Thank you very much, Francis Stockbridge. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. And I'll let you all know, the reason I let it go on a little bit longer, always, is not so much for me talking, although I do. It's like a little sub-community here, isn't it? You know, not just here, but in other lives as well. And you enjoy chatting amongst yourselves, which is fine. I'm secondary, which is fine as well. Yeah, hopefully speak soon, Jim. Yeah, enjoyed the chat the other day. You'll have to keep your language down though, Rob CP, if you've got a Harrogate, you know. They don't swear up in Yorkshire much. Andy, Clonetty, good night, mate. All the best. Thanks very much for coming. Appreciated it. Appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that, mate. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to say good night. And you said bon voyage then. I'm not going on holiday, that's for sure. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And I think Marky Mark's enjoyed it as well, up to a point. It's been very rude to me, though. Upset me a bit. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I'm not sure about next Sunday, but I'll keep you informed towards the end of next week if I'm on next Sunday. And if I am, you can go and do something else. Well, thank you very much again. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you very soon. Good night now. Bye.